Thank you all for being here. My name is Sarah Kennedy, and I work in the Department of Education at MoMA as Assistant Director for Learning Programs and Partnerships. I'm a cisgender woman with blonde hair pulled back on my head. I have blue eyes, rosy cheeks most of the time, and I'm wearing a turquoise shirt and a beaded green necklace today. As some of you may know, MoMA has an ongoing partnership with CUNY. We organize programs and events, offer free admission to the museum, share resources and publications, and a lot more. This is the first of several professional development programs we are hosting this spring. And today we'll hear directly from MoMA staff members who are also CUNY alumni or professors about their own paths to careers in the arts. We hope this conversation will shed some light on the professional development process and offer some ideas for those of you who are interested in learning about and pursuing careers in the visual arts, arts education, or in arts administration yourselves. Before we begin the program, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am located where I am today on unceded Canarsie, Lenape, and Nyack land, also known as Brooklyn, New York, due to Indigenous peoples' displacement and forced removal from this location. The Museum of Modern Art and CUNY campuses in all 5 boroughs are also located on the unceded Lenape land where Indigenous peoples lived and live due to their varying relationships to these histories and systems. We acknowledge that the work created within MoMA is always marked by our relationship to these histories. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Lenape community and their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We also acknowledge that MoMA was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples, including those on which land the institution is located. Lastly, and most importantly, if you are a lineage bearer who is original to the land you're on right now, or who carries a familial history of forced displacement and laboring, we honor you in this place. I'd now like to share some tips on participation, on how we're going to sort of share the space here together today that will hopefully help us. If you're comfortable, you can rename yourself on Zoom to include your name and pronouns. You can see the grid view of participants here today by clicking on the top right-hand corner of your screen and selecting gallery view. You're welcome to use the raise hand function and or type in the chat to share questions or request technical assistance at any time. My colleague Hannah will be moderating the chat. Thank you, Hannah. And thank you to our colleagues, Fred and Howie in AV as well. After the presentations, we will open up the conversation to a Q&A with all of you. We'll do our best to address as many questions as we can during the discussion portion of the program. And during that time in the discussion, you can raise your hand or type in the chat, and I will invite you to unmute yourself to speak. You can please state your name when you begin speaking. This session is being transcribed using edited cart captioning. To access the transcription, please click on the CC button on your screen and press Show Subtitles. And to facilitate a collective experience, we encourage you to keep your video on and connect with others, but this is optional. So if you need a break at any point, feel free to turn your video off. And also, as was noted upon registration, a reminder that this is being recorded, this program, with the hopes that we can share it with any CUNY students who weren't able to join us here today. If you prefer not to be recorded, please feel free to turn your video off. And last but not least, we really value your contributions to this program. We will speak from our own experiences here today. We will join in and use our own voice and step back to make space for others, the voices of others. We're thinking and learning together, and we need each other's ideas. So let's dive in. How does one find opportunities in the visual arts? What's it like to work in an art museum? What are museums looking for in an employee? To help us answer these questions, it is great pleasure to welcome my colleagues Abed Haddad, Amara Thomas, Paul Galloway, William Umana, Mac Cole Edelsack, and Sydney Briggs. So to begin, I'm going to ask each of you to give us a brief introduction to yourself, your job in the day-to-day at MoMA, and a brief view into your own journeys into a career in the arts. Following these introductions, we will open up a conversation guided by some of the questions students have already shared with us, and then we'll open up the Q&A to hear from all of you. So without further ado, Abed, I will turn it over to you first.
Hi, can you hear me? Good. Hi, my name is Abed Haddad. I am a conservation scientist at MoMA. In my day-to-day at the museum, I collaborate with conservators, curators, registrars, art handlers, engineers, and more, making sure that the collection is well cared for. My duties can range from doing an analysis on samples that conservators take that relate to particular treatments, making sure that the temperature and humidity in the galleries and storage facilities are up to par to help with the longevity of the collection, as well as carrying out primary research on artist materials and techniques. I have a passion for pigments and dyes in particular, and I've studied artists such as Matisse, Calder, Alan Atsui, and Sophie Taber. My undergraduate background is in chemistry and art history. I went to college in a small liberal arts college in Jackson, Mississippi, where I was able to study both analytical chemistry as well as art history. When I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with those two degrees, I was alerted by my art history teacher of the field of conservation. I was really interested in the science aspect of it, which led me to a PhD in chemistry from the Graduate Center under the supervision of Dr. John Lombardi at City College. So when I was looking for advisors to work with, I was really excited to get to work with someone like Professor Lombardi, who is a leader in the realm of conservation science, um, specifically because he built a very strong connection to the Metropolitan Museum and introduced Raman spectroscopy, a particular fingerprint technique, a molecular fingerprint technique to the field. I was very lucky to be able to work with him. And when MoMA in particular acquires such an instrument, they reached out first to Dr. Lombardi, who kind of brought me on. And MoMA was very excited to have me as an expert to help set up the instrument. And I have been here ever since. CUNY afforded me with the opportunity of a lifetime to be able to work with such great objects and such great people, to be able to present works in the best condition that they can be seen in. And I also still frequently reach out to my colleagues in City College for collaboration. It's having that connection to the city and having that connection to the faculty and students there has been amazing. I cannot talk more about it. And I'm happy to have you with us here today, and I will turn it to Amara.
Hi, thanks, Ovid. Hello, everyone. My name is Amara, and I am the Petrie Fellow working in teen programs and community partnerships here at MoMA. And yeah, so what that means is I create and run various like studio art and arts programming for teen audiences across the city, as well as nonprofits and community groups. So for example, right now I'm working with a group of teens and we are creating and sending art to each other through the mail. So exploring mail art, doing collaging and zine making all in our bedrooms, which is really cool. So I went to Hunter for undergrad, studied creative writing. I had done art classes at Hunter, but never really saw myself as someone who would work in the arts. Really thought I'd be a journalist. That's why I studied creative writing. But when I got to graduation, I didn't really see that manifesting in a full-time job. So I took a gig doing grant writing in DC, did not know what grant writing was, but was able to convince them that I did. But while I was working at that organization, I realized that I actually liked the programming side because it was a nonprofit that was geared towards bringing underserved youth into cultural institutions, specifically the Smithsonian. And then I realized that there's a whole field of museum education. I was like, this is really sick. So I took on a bunch of various like nonprofit jobs exploring working with youth and making and art activities in galleries and using collections, and just realized that that was something that I was really passionate about. And yeah, I'm actually back at Hunter right now taking classes in the Integrated Media Arts program, MFA program. I love CUNY. My dad worked at CUNY, went to CUNY, and yeah, I've been a part of CUNY all my life. So shouts to Free CUNY, and I will turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Amara. This is always such a pleasure to be speaking to you. My name is Paul Galloway. I'm the collection specialist for the Architecture and Design Department here at MoMA. That's one of the many curatorial departments we have here. We kind of divide our collection into different kind of fields. And I've been at MoMA since 2005, which is also the same year I started teaching at Bronx Community College. So I'm not an alumni of CUNY, but I've been involved with CUNY for 16 years now. And so I feel I'm very blessed to have the best of both worlds. I get the really wonderful kind of rich environment that I have at MoMA, and once a week I get to, it's my favorite day of the week, get to go up to the Bronx, or I used to get to go up to the Bronx. I'm going back to the Bronx soon. We're already making plans for a return to in-person instruction, and I'm really looking forward to it, as are all of your other professors. And so I've been really fortunate to have this kind of dual life as an employee of MoMA and an employee of CUNY. And the interaction of the two has kept me sane all these many years. So my job description here at MoMA is, as collection specialist, I'm kind of the central node for all things happening with the collection, whether that's acquiring new objects into the collection, helping with research on objects in the collection, running a study center. We have archives of the architects Frank Lloyd Wright and Mies van der Rohe. So I work with researchers, I work with curators. I am involved with exhibitions. I'm working on one right now. So it's kind of, I sprawl in many different directions and have my hand in a lot of different projects. But it's an enormously challenging and fun place to work, and I've greatly enjoyed my time here. And it's been a place that's been really helpful as a place to learn and grow. And I say that because I came into this field in a kind of sideways fashion. I studied studio art in undergraduate and graduate school, and went to the University of North Texas for undergrad and the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia for graduate school. Came to, after that I lived in Houston, and I started teaching at various colleges, including Houston Community College, and worked at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and then came here to New York because I heard there was a shortage of artists living in New York. So I thought, well, they're handing out art careers, why don't I go to New York? And then started working in odd jobs in art galleries. I worked at SVA, and then I took a job in the MoMA library. That was my first position here at MoMA, was as a library assistant, pulling and shelving books. I missed that job tremendously. And then after a couple of years, worked my way. I convinced people I knew what I was doing and started working in architecture and design. And it's been 14 years now that I've been in architecture and design. And it's been an enormously fulfilling experience. And to have CUNY in my life at that same time has been a wonderful, wonderful gift. So that's me in brief. I'll pass it on to Billy now.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to speak with you all. My name is William Umana, or as many know me by Billy, at the MoMA, and I'm Assistant Director in Visitor Engagement at MoMA. And as Assistant Director, I oversee a team of guest assistants and managers who work to create the warm and welcome experience we hope to have all of our guests have when they arrive at the museum. And one of my direct responsibilities is also managing the ticketing system, which was very important to the museum's reopening, as we recently had to implement time ticketing with the capacity restrictions during the pandemic. I joined the museum back in 2013, which is the same year I graduated from Brooklyn College. I also did go to Kingsborough Community College as well for my 2-year liberal arts degree. So shout out to those who are going to Kingsborough. And I did not have the conventional path to the museum. During my time in college, I did a little bit of work as a Mason tender, working with Local 79. And then I also was a superintendent of an apartment building in Flatbush, Brooklyn. After graduating school in 2013, I found myself with a lot of free time as the superintendent job was not that demanding. So I actually just applied for a temp job at the Museum of Modern Art. And I do have a history and a background with museums. I had a job with the Brooklyn Museum at one point, and I grew up essentially in the American Museum of Natural History, where my mother continued to work to this day. So I always had a love and affection for museums and cultural institutions, and also having, the opportunity to pretty much work in solitude as a superintendent. I knew I wanted to be back engaging with people and working with the public. Working at the Museum of Modern Art, I've had the chance to meet people from all across the world. And 60% of our visitors are tourists there for their first time. Well, not recently with the pandemic, but historically, that's what our visitor base has been. And just knowing that someone's on their dream vacation in New York City and, they wanted to see Starry Night for so many years and they're finally here and I'm able to put a fingerprint on their experience is one of the most gratifying feelings. I started at the museum as a holiday temp, actually, and just through timing and opportunity and hard work, I eventually became a permanent employee not too long after that. I wouldn't say approximately 6 months. And the same thing with then being promoted to a manager, a lobby manager. It was timing, opportunity, and continuing with the hard work. I would receive the opportunity to become manager, and a few years after that, I was then promoted to assistant director. And I can't believe I've been with the museum now going on 8 years. It's just incredible. And with that, I will pass it on to my colleague, Mac.
Thank you, Billy. I actually was a porter for 32 BJ out of high school. So my name is Mac Cole Edelsack. I'm Senior Design Manager in the Department of Exhibition Design and Production. I'm responsible day-to-day for physical design and production of any exhibitions I'm assigned on, as well as kind of this ongoing process of refining and strengthening the museum design standards. So most recently, due to COVID, we've had to make a pretty major transition from physical model to digital. A show I'm very proud of that just opened, Reconstructions, was really the first one to be essentially designed entirely virtually with the curatorial and participating artists and architects all meeting over Zoom in a 3D model. Our department actually includes 8 people in the office, designers, production managers, and then it also includes the frame shop, the paint shop, carpentry shop, and the lighting and electrical shop, all of whom are in various unions. And I'm sure there'll be another opportunity to talk to some of them. Those are also really interesting jobs that I probably won't get too far into. My connection to City College is pretty much as long as my life. My father was a founding faculty member at Sophie Davis, and some of my earliest memories are visiting him at Marshak. So years later, when I had finally made the very circuitous decision to go to architecture school, it just made sense. Actually, he, at that point, started making friends with fellow professors in Shepherd Hall. And he was like, yeah, call this guy Alan. He might have something to say. And so I started going up to City College. I took some classes part-time before I finally matriculated first into the second bachelor's program, and then I was in the inaugural MArch class. My path to my career at MoMA is as rambling as what I just said, but involves lots of jobs, including 6th grade teacher, tax preparer, draftsman, and at an engineering company. I worked right out of grad school. I took what, quote unquote, the best job at an architecture firm that I could find. And after about a year, was getting pretty disillusioned and got an offer to make a big transition and basically go work on an artist project in LA. And it was a project for Mike Kelly, where he needed an architecture firm to develop the first commission for Art Angel. So it was the mobile homestead that was built in Detroit. It just so happened he needed an architect kind of who traveled between LA and Detroit, and the old director of my program was that. So I went out and did that project. Financial crisis, got laid off with everyone else, and spent kind of a year and a half between getting my license and re-engaging in an art practice that I had started with a buddy of mine in college. And the output of that practice morphed into a lot of exhibition design. And when we were finishing our residency in Dallas, my partner Tom said, hey, why don't you try to get a job in exhibition design? And I kind of laughed because who would pay me to do that? And then I went back to New York and I worked in construction management and was ready to make a move and was putting together my resume, and it made no sense. And I would get no responses when I would send it to architecture firms, even though I didn't want to work in an architecture firm. And then a friend forwarded the job description here at MoMA, and suddenly it looked like I had spent my entire life preparing for this one job. So it really has been a great blessing. And yeah, I've been here 7 years. And with that, I'll pass it to my esteemed colleague, Sydney Briggs.
Thanks, Mac. I hope you all don't hear, I'm having a little bit of a New York City housing moment where someone is banging next door to me. So I hope that you can't hear that. My name is Sydney Briggs, and I'm an associate registrar at the museum. For those of you who might not be familiar with the Department of Registrar, we're charged with overseeing the logistical care of the permanent collection and temporary exhibitions in cooperation with many colleagues, including curatorial, conservation, art handling, who are actually the people who do the physical work of moving and installing works of art, exhibition administration, which manages our budgets and insurance, and exhibition design and production, which Mac just spoke of. I've worked at the museum for 20 years, and during that time, I've overseen the care of collections in our Department of Painting and Sculpture, Media and Performance Art, drawings and prints. And that work basically that I've done has involved organizing the transfer and intake of new acquisitions, documenting artwork, managing loans to borrowing institutions, as well as coordinating long-term storage and care of artwork. I graduated from Wesleyan University with a BA in art history. So I was always sure that I wanted to work in the arts, but I wasn't sure what capacity I wanted to work. So I worked, when I first finished my undergraduate degree, I started working in a few galleries in Manhattan and New York. I'm from New York. And around the first time that I settled on really my first job as a registrar officially in the late 90s, I had decided to audit a class at Hunter, at the Graduate Center at Hunter, where I met Professor Bill Agee, who was really an encouraging professor at the time in the Department of Art History, and he welcomed my interest in auditing his contemporary survey class to see if I wanted to continue with a graduate degree. But honestly, to be very honest, it was more for me to convince myself that I could, in fact, actually pursue this degree. I decided to apply. It was positive, and I decided to apply to Hunter because at the time it had really robust offering of contemporary art, which I was very interested in. I still am very interested in, and it was very inexpensive. It was someplace that I could afford, and I could continue to work. It was one of the few places that offered an opportunity for one to pursue their graduate degree and work at the same time. So because I was working, my studies were very drawn out, and I was only attending part-time, so I was only taking 1 or 2 classes a semester. So I was taking more time than the average student. And as I kind of progressed through the program, I transitioned to MoMA and began to sort of more officially embrace like a professional role of registrar, and my interest in collection management was growing. And because of that, I felt a little bit out of sync with my studies because I was studying art history and I wasn't really intending to become a curator, which generally, if you're an art history student, a lot of that is driving you towards that area. And, but I do believe that my art history training was absolutely essential, and it's really enhanced my work as a registrar. It's grounded my thinking and my response to the care of art in the historical understanding of artistic practices and its importance in society. I take it very seriously, my work as a registrar. I actually often say that I feel like being a registrar is a little bit like being a librarian, because I take care of objects, but librarians take care of books. And I really cherish the professors that I had the opportunity to learn from. Among them, I've always really very much loved the minimalism seminar that I took with Pepe Carmel, who was at one time an art critic of the New York Times. And I always enjoyed the opportunity to learn from my fellow classmates, and some of whom really were extremely encouraging of my interests. So I've had like a very fond connection to to the CUNY system, and many of my colleagues even today still, as you see, are all come through that. So thank you.
Thank you all for those introductions and sharing with us your own paths to where you are today. I think it might be nice to start off with a question. Now, before I do, I just want to reiterate how to participate. So we're going to start off this conversation with a few questions that all of you shared, all the participants who are here today, in your registration process, and try to sort of get to as many of them as we can during this conversation part. But if you have a question that you want to raise today, we encourage you to leave it in the chat and or raise your hand, and we'll call on you to unmute yourself and bring your voice into the space. Hannah will be helping to make sure that we see those and don't miss any of your questions. So to start us off, I'd love to hear from all of you about what your work experience was like immediately after graduating from college, and where you started your career. I don't know who wants to go first. Does anyone have? Paul, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I already told Sarah this. My first job straight out of college was at a BP gas station in Colbert, Georgia. It looks like Colbert, but in Georgia they say Colbert. But it was actually a really great job because you had free unlimited fried chicken. And so that was, and actually it was a really great kind of experience for me to sort of do that because I did it right before I went into graduate school. And it was a great way of regrounding myself into the act of work. And it taught me a work ethic that actually really helped carry me through into graduate school, and then from graduate school into the many, many jobs that I've had since then. But my first kind of official job in a museum was at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, which was after graduate school. And I was working in the slide library. Many of the people on this call are way too young to know what a slide is, but it used to be this archaic piece of film encased in plastic or glass that you would put in a machine and it would project an image on a wall. And I would mount those. That was my first job in a museum, I guess.
Would anyone else like to answer that question from our speakers?
Oh, I'm happy to go too. When I first graduated, as I mentioned, I worked in some galleries, one of which was a very well-known now gallery named June Kelly. She is one of the few African-American art dealers in the city, and I worked for her for about 5 years. But before I actually got to her, I worked in another gallery that was like a print, specializing in print and multiples. And basically I just got those by just applying to them. I just sort of randomly just hit the streets, walk in the streets looking for a job, and that in that area. So that's how I started and moved on from there.
My first job out of undergrad was as a 6th grade teacher, and as a 22-year-old at 5'5.5", I basically looked like an 8th grader. So to address also one of the questions in the chat, I'm very familiar with imposter syndrome. It is straight through the age of 44. It's just part of, I think it's part of life in a sort of capitalist schizophrenic society. But I think, hopefully you surround yourself with good people. I certainly had great teachers around me when I was a 6th grade teacher, thinking that I was failing every day, who really helped prop me up. And I think at a place like MoMA, one of the great things that anyone who works here would tell you is there's such a wonderful community of colleagues when things aren't going so well, to kind of, that you can lean on and talk to. And
thanks for sharing that, Mac. I'm gonna call on Jason Applebaum, who's raised his hand to share a question. If you want to unmute yourself, Jason.
I did.
Great. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Hello. It's a thrill to be here. My time used to be spent teaching juggling in Bryant Park and then either going to the research library or going to a museum. New York for my whole life has been my playground of the arts. It would be my dream to work at MoMA. I have my degree in fine arts. I have a particular love for Shakespeare. But, you know, what can you do? I noticed that most of the people that are working at MoMA are somewhere between their 30s and their late 40s, with one or two exceptions. Do you guys hire people who are in their late 50s?
We do. We hire people at all stages. I think it's really about finding the right person for the role. I wouldn't say that we are concerned with the age that you are. I think it's really about having the right experience for the job and coming into the role with something that you're going to add that is necessary for that function. I mean, one of the things that I heard from all of the people in this conversation today is that you've all got different jobs and you've all had different paths, and it seems important to emphasize how many different roles there are within the museum. And someone asked, there's a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to try to bring out one of the ones here. How can a CUNY student stand out? This is from Philip. Stand out in the application process when it appears that MoMA employees have an Ivy League or NYU education. I don't know if any of you can speak to sort of what you might be looking for in terms of roles that you try to fill within your own departments in a candidate.
Should
I would say,
go Billy. Yeah, go.
I was going to say my initial thought in terms of how a CUNY student would stand out and say above I think it was the Ivy League student, is the specific to visitor engagement is the familiarity with New York. And ideally, maybe you're taking advantage of those CUNY benefits and visiting all the cultural institutions, and you're aware of like what the art scene looks like, and able to make those kinds of recommendations to our guests, because that is very important to the experience we hope to deliver to our visitors. A very personalized, tailored experience in a way. So a big part of that is being able to make recommendations, where to go to eat, what other museums have really great exhibitions at this time. And I would say someone who went to a CUNY might be more equipped to help in that area than say someone who went to an Ivy League that's out of state. That would be just my initial thought.
Can I add to this question, Sarah? Cool.
Please do.
Yeah, I can speak from the perspective of, I don't have the power to hire anyone, but I will be honest, when I walked into my interview at Hunter, I mean, at MoMA, I was like super insecure because I am a CUNY kid and had done tons of internships where people would ask me, oh, is Hunter in the Bronx? Like, I've never even heard of CUNY, So I thought I didn't have a shot at all because I was not with all the prestigious NYU, whatever, the MFAs and all the things. But it was interesting to find out that, like, I think from what I heard, they preferred me because I could relate to the teens and the audiences that we worked with. Like, some of the teens grew up in my neighborhood. Like, I knew the high schools that they went to. I was able to connect with them because I had that New York experience that some of the other candidates didn't. So I just want to say, like, never underestimate that experience. And I think there's something really special about being from the city and having that, narrative. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
And I want to add to that personally, in my experience when I was applying for graduate schools, I was accepted to several schools that might be considered, top tier for chemistry programs, but I personally chose to go to the Graduate Center and to City College for two reasons. One, it is in New York. It is a center for the arts. There are tons of museums. There are tons of opportunities, galleries, people who work in arts education, people work in conservation, people work in art handling, registrars, etc. There are a lot of opportunities to be able to get involved in a meaningful way to understand what the, quote unquote, the art world looks like outside of even just being an artist. But two, recognizing that CUNY has a lot of great faculty who have those great connections already in place. For me, coming into City College in particular was because of Professor Lombardi. I knew he had a connection to the Metropolitan Museum. I was interested in this particular field. And so I think there is this kind of, it tales with imposter syndrome, but there's sometimes this feeling of diminutive feeling of not being at a Columbia or at a Harvard or whatever it may be when you are entering the art world, but understand that your education comes with a lot more experience. And I think a lot of students who might be coming from outside of the city when it comes to obtaining opportunities within the city.
Thank you for
I would,
sharing that. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
I just wanted to add to what Abed was saying is that I know from the outside, MoMA can have this big kind of monolithic, like, oh, it's the MoMA kind of thing. But from inside, we see the like spilled food and the messes, and we are very, we are interested in people who can bring a lot to the table. When I'm talking to somebody, when I'm reading what they've written, when I'm hearing them speak or hearing what they can bring, I'm not paying attention to where they went to school. I'm paying attention to what they can communicate, what are their abilities, what are the skill sets they are bringing in here, and oh, look, they went to this school or that school. I'm interested in the person personally.
Yeah, and I think a thing that CUNY students, I mean, certainly my experience at City College and with my fellow students, and this was borne out, all of us who got jobs afterward heard this from our employers, which was, we were the best workers. I went to a firm where almost everyone had gone to the honors program at Georgia Tech or Harvard GSD. And three of us who went there from CUNY did very well there because we just we knew how to work. And I see that here. I see that with interns we've had. I see that with people we've hired in this department and other departments. I think the New York centrism is an amazing thing about having gone to CUNY if you're trying to get a job in the arts, which in this country, really, New York is a great place for that. And I think everyone knows of CUNY students as hard workers.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for those thoughtful responses. It was great to hear from all of you. I'm going to call on Christian to unmute yourself and share your question, please.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us all today and everything. I came a little late, so sorry if you guys maybe touched on this, but I was just curious. I've only recently started graduate school, but just looking at job boards and everything like that, I find a lot of a common theme is that you're required to have a master's degree and the base pay could range from anywhere between like $35,000 and $60,000 a year, which is just really not livable, especially in New York City. And I was wondering if any of you had maybe experience or if you had any advice on how recent graduates can manage such low income while being in this field, because it can be very scary. I think for me, especially, it's definitely something I think about pretty often.
I'll jump on that because I mean, I just remember when I first graduated and was out, like I said, just hitting the streets trying to find a job. I did, in fact, work several jobs at the same time. And I do agree with you. I think that that our industry has not always been so fair in terms of providing wages that people could just, work and take care of their whole families at the entry level. It is very difficult. And honestly, I think it is a question that's ongoing for everyone, even once they've been working in positions for long periods of time. So as a person who is just really starting out, all I can say is that one of the main things is that if you want to work in a museum, they are looking for people to have some experiences. So if anytime you have an opportunity to work in galleries, which have more flexibility with some of their staffing, or if you have, you can apply for fellowships, which are paid. I mean, those things are very essential to helping you gain the experience so that you can move on and move ahead. But it's tough. I mean, I'm not even going to really lie about that. It's very difficult in the beginning. And I don't think anyone on this panel hasn't experienced that. So, and it shouldn't be about oh, are you really willing to just suffer just for something that you love? I mean, that's a reality in our country today, I think, really.
I just want to acknowledge how many amazing questions you've all put into the chat, and we're going to do our best to get to all of them. So stay tuned, and we are also going to follow up with a resource email trying to address some of this. But I want to take Diana's question. Is there anything you wish you did or didn't do that would have made your career path much easier to achieve? And I guess sort of wondering if any of you have some advice for CUNY students as they prepare to transition from school into a career in the arts, and how you get your foot in the door, so to speak.
I think I'll speak to this one. One thing you can do, and I wish I had the opportunity to do, was work more internships. That is a great way to network, build bridges, and to literally get your foot in the door. And living in New York City, that's not always possible. I was a working student. I held, several jobs while I was working. So it was hard for me to give away time for free, essentially. But internships are a great way of meeting people and just getting that shoe in, I guess to say.
And I would echo what William's saying. Internships are a great way because then you're a known quantity, right? And we're always going to be more interested in hiring and promoting somebody that we know. And even if they're moving into a different field. I started out in the library. There's a collection specialist in the Department of Drawings and Prints, Kunbi Oni, who used to work in our legal office. She was in charge of that office. So it is really common, and I know this in other museums as well, where somebody starts in one field and then they kind of move over to another field, because you're a known quantity, and the staff and one manager knows another manager, and they can say, oh, he may not have training in this, but he's awesome, or so give him a shot. So internships, any foot in the door, a toe in the door.
I will say also, as it comes to curricula, for example, if you have an idea of what you want to do, talk to people who've already gone to grad school, for example, or have the job that you want. What kind of classes did they take? What kind of opportunities in school, in the classroom, did they take or harness to be able to kind of get the knowledge that they need to either progress their graduate program or to find gainful employment, right? Because some jobs will ask for your CV, but some jobs will also ask for your transcript. They're interested in what kind of classes you might have taken. So to get that kind of knowledge while you're already in school, not to have to worry about it once you have graduated, is also a, I don't want to say a leg up, but it's a great opportunity to do that while you're in the undergraduate phase.
I think the thing I wish I had done differently, and I don't know if it would have made my life any easier, but it took me a very long time to realize that the most important thing about my career is what I was doing day to day, not what it sounded like, or what I could tell my mom I was doing, or what I could tell my friends I was doing. I think I narrowed very early on, even in my last year of college, I just completely narrowed the range of things I even thought about, because I was so sure it had to be one of these, 4 categories or something, or this was the only thing that my degree could lead to. And then, in the end, like so many people, I catered, I did all these jobs after school anyway. I just wish I had had a much more kind of open mind and spent more time really thinking about like the day-to-day, because what I finally learned is I just really like drawing rectangles, and finally got a job where I can spend a significant number of hours every week drawing rectangles.
I thank you so much, everybody, for answering that. I think one of the questions that's come up here from Madeline, I think some of the questions are echoed in other comments that people have made. As someone who's about to graduate with a master's in art history and curation and is actively looking for a job, how do you differentiate yourself? And I think this goes for other roles. How do you differentiate yourself throughout the job application process? And how can you, position your CUNY degree as helpful in getting that job that you're hoping for?
I guess I should take that since I'm in the curatorial department. It's hard to have one straight answer for that, because curatorial departments are very widely within one museum, and from one museum to another, they can be very, very different. Some places prefer somebody who's hyper specialized in one specific area. They want you to know everything there is to know about Soviet photography in the 1920s and 1930s and to speak 5 languages. And other places prefer a generalist who can be take on any project. And all right, now you're suddenly doing an exhibition on this and you have no expertise in it, but we know that you're a good researcher and you've got skills to learn and kind of get up to speed on these things. So one kind of key that I would say, especially at CUNY, as Mac and others have said, you're sitting in a gold mine of connections, and that is your professors have connections at other museums, not just MoMA, and they've got connections there, they've got connections at other schools, and somebody knows somebody. And you have to also remember that museums I'm not the only person who works in a curatorial department and also teaches on the site. It's extremely common that you have curators who also teach. So that kind of academic connection is a really wonderful resource that you have at CUNY. So I would lean on your professors and don't be afraid to ask them and to twist their arms.
Thank you so much. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I would just also say, and also write to people who have the job that you want. I think Abed mentioned that earlier too. You should definitely reach out to people because you'd be surprised how generous people really are with their time and with their knowledge. So definitely just go for it. Don't hold yourself back, but also don't. Oftentimes, like we study and we accumulate these degrees in these particular fields that we've spent all these years, putting all this time into, but in fact, like sometimes there are adjacent fields that you might find yourself fitting in even better. So, keep yourself open. Even though you might be interested in curatorial, there are many jobs in a museum. So, maybe you'll be a better fit in education and they might have more openings, and you can take the opportunity to kind of check that out, in your early years as you're still exploring. So just definitely don't solidify yourself in one path until you're really kind of 100% sure and have actually taken on a job in the museum to see how it works, because the museum, the transfer of information that you've learned in school to the museum space is also a very big difference and experience. And so any job that you take and have the opportunity to experience that space, be it a museum or in an auction house or a gallery, all of that will really benefit you in the long run.
And I will add that your experience can be very different from institution to institution too, which can also, change and shape your, thinking about what you think you might want to do, if I can add that. I want to give a chance, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. It just says iPhone, but you've had your hand up patiently waiting for a long time. I'd love for you to unmute yourself and join us in this space.
Hi, my name is Sabina Michael Green. I graduated from Hunter with a BA in art history. Then a couple of years later, I went for my master in disabilities and higher education. So I was wondering, how can one get a job combining these two degrees? Can you hear me?
I hear you. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good question. I think you have to look for the right thing. I think one of the things in the education department at MoMA, we work with a variety of different access audiences. We create a lot of programming for audiences with different disabilities. That said, I think that you would I think a different mix of skills. It's not always sort of the exact path that you think is going to be exactly what you imagine. The roles might open up for yourself that you combine with, experiences. And someone else has asked, whether experience is more important than, what you have on paper. And I think it's the combination of all those things. Sometimes it can be a circuitous role to get path to get to where you want to go. I think that probably the position that you're thinking about does exist somewhere, and it may be that it morphs through the experience of working somewhere, and your own lived experience and your own knowledge, helps to create a space. But I don't know that there's a one exact answer to that, combination, and that there's one role somewhere. It might be something that has to be discovered through work experience. I don't know if that's a very clear answer. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that response. If not, I'm going to move on. And this is a question for Paul. Has your work at MoMA intersected with the classes you teach at the Bronx Community College? How might community college students become more exposed to museum collections and skill sets?
I have my work at MoMA has benefited tremendously by my contact with my students and by the constant kind of interchange and interplay and conversations I have with my students. I write better wall labels now because of my teaching. I think my work at MoMA informs my teaching, and my teaching informs my work at MoMA. So how to kind of bring them in, before the pandemic, every semester I would bring my class into the museum. And in particular, I loved taking them into our offices and showing them a model, one of the models Mac might be working on, and I try to keep everybody from touching it and moving a painting that Mac had very carefully put on one specific wall, to kind of to demystify it, right? Because we're all very aware how MoMA looks from the outside. And I love bringing people in and showing them the leaky pipes and showing them where we've messed up and where things don't go right all the time. And because it really makes you understand that there's people behind us. We're all human beings. We have our skills we're really good at. We all mess up at things as well. So I think that simple act for my students, I have found, of demystifying it, talking to other people, talking to other curators, talking to the guards, talking to education staff, really helps them understand, oh, this is just an office. This is a place people work. They go in, they punch the clock, they do their job, and then they go home. And I find that has been something my students have really enjoyed, and I can't wait to start doing that again when we can do such things again.
And I will add that part of the CUNY partnership, our goals is really to try to work closely with faculty and with students in different ways, to find ways that we might be able to, bring the resources that we do have at MoMA into the structure of a curriculum over a semester, if that makes sense. And I think through a programming that we do, we with teachers and with schools, but then also, extending to this CUNY partnership, is really to sort of work with different professors who might want to bring art into the classroom, even if they're teaching science or math or a different discipline. Is there a way that we can help work with them to figure out how, some of the resources that we have might open up different pathways of thinking around what they might be focused on thematically in a semester in their classroom, and somehow, incorporate a visit to MoMA into it. So I just want to add that as sort of a way to sort of think about, we're kind of open in this partnership to trying to figure out what are the best ways to help people have more chances to intersect with the institution and the different ways of working here. John, I'd like to call on you. You've had your hand raised for a while, to unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking time to talk to us today. And Paul, I'm a former Scrappy Eagle myself, so I know how it is to go from Texas to New York City. I was reading through the chats, and Hannah kind of touched on this. Can you talk more about the 7-month internship programs that y'all have available? I know some people talked about, not being able to give away time for free. And I noticed that there is a stipend that comes along with it. But Paul, I'm from Texas, so coming to New York is a big jump. And so it can feel, like y'all have said, a little scary from the outside. And I was interested in applying for one of these internships, maybe the photography or the archives, because I'm getting my master's in library science. I just wanted to know, just any kind of tips or information that you have possible.
Sure, I'll let Sarah and Hannah talk about the internship program is run by education, thank God, because they actually know what they're doing more than the rest of us. And I think one key, because I have a niece who's also looking into internships in museums, and I've told her, and I'll tell you the same thing, you don't have to get hung up on trying to get an internship it's got to be at Met, it's got to be at MoMA, it's got to be at the Guggenheim. An internship at a nonprofit in Denton, Texas, you can go back to Denton, right? Is a great experience, right? What we are looking for and what any museum is looking for is somebody with a wealth of experience. So, and it doesn't have to be at some gigantic institution like the Met or MoMA or the Guggenheim. So don't, if you are going to do it in New York, it's hard. It's very hard living here on our salaries, so I don't want to sugarcoat that, which is why I would say it's not such a bad idea if you don't have a stable income here to begin with. Broaden your search. Look at places in Virginia, California, Texas, all kinds of places can be a really positive experience. But I think Sarah should speak on the other points of the internship.
Sure, I'm happy to. So MoMA actually, and we're in this sort of funny moment because of the pandemic where there's been shifts, but typically we have had for many, many years a 12-month internship program that begins in September and goes for a year. It's a paid internship program. The interns take positions in a variety of different departments across the institution and work in different capacities. And the application process is a competitive one. There are there's a lot of interest, and there are, I believe, anywhere between this year, I think we have 10 7-month interns that actually onboarded a month ago and will be with us through September or midway through September. And then the hope is that this program will resume again and become an annual program. And we also typically have had seasonal interns that have a position at the museum, also paid for shorter periods of time, around 3 months, in different departments. And it's really an opportunity. And those are not full time; they're part time positions. But those are really an opportunity. There's certainly the 12-month interns to really, explore what it would be like to work almost like a full-time staff in those departments and really get your hands on, what it is that department does and the various functions. So working in education, we work with an intern who is, working closely with our team on all aspects of public programming, from the conceiving of programs to the logistics of bringing them together in the way that, we brought this program together today. And we welcome CUNY students to apply to these opportunities. They do the longer term sort of annual programs only come up in the spring, and Hannah will be following up. Well, she's actually shared a link here, which you're obviously referring to, and we'll follow up because the opportunities for those coming forward, because the cohort started recently, but in the next cohort will be posted on MoMA's website, and I encourage you to apply if you're interested. And there actually is currently an intern who is working in our archives department, so that's closely aligned with your interest in studies. My way into MoMA was through an internship. So I feel like, and I also had a lot of internships, throughout my career. So I just want to echo what a lot of my colleagues have said about just how important it is to sort of try different things and figure out what it is that you're most interested in to pursue with vigor. I wanted to bring into the space a question that came up about, what might have surprised some of you about working in the field or at MoMA, and maybe one of your favorite parts of working at the museum, or a special memory that you might want to share with everybody who's here today. Would anyone like to take that first?
I'll go. I would like to say that one of two things. That even though everything looks so perfect and pristine all the time, it really doesn't run that way. And that actually makes it much more human, because it's just like an impossible thing sometimes when you come in. And that point relates to something else, which is that my very first day of working, when I received my opportunity to work at MoMA, and at that time I was just working as a project registrar on our digitization of our of the architecture and design department lamps. That was such a long time ago. My first day, one of my colleagues in the department that I worked with now took me on a tour. And this was back before the last 2 expansions of the museum. So I've been around a long time. If any of you know what the museum looked like about 20 years ago, she showed me one of the rooms, the storage rooms, and they were literally a little door right off of the gallery. Like you go into a gallery and there was this little door that you almost didn't see on the wall. And she opened this door and then you just walk through. And I was like, wow, all of this was right behind these doors. And it was just this wonderful like surprise and just feeling like a kid in a candy store. And it was just really a beautiful experience. And I continue to remember that awe that I had, that everything was just right there.
That's such a nice picture in my mind. Thank you for sharing that, Sydney. Does anyone else want to chime in with a little magic from their job?
I have to say, I didn't go into undergrad with like an idea to study art history. Both my parents are architects, but they did not want me to do anything with architecture. They wanted me to be a doctor. So I went to a liberal arts college and I was taking this like art history class, and nothing really hit me as hard as seeing this particular painting by De Chirico called Song of Love, with this like big orange glove there and like kind of a marble head of a sculpture. And that painting made me fall in love with just art. And I was, one day I walk into the conservation studios, and as Sydney was saying, the humanity of it, I just saw the painting just leaning very casually against the glass windows that we have in the lab. And I kind of cried a little bit, just a little bit, because I was so proud of myself personally to feel like I've accomplished so much and I've gotten to a place where I was able to connect with the object that made me fall in love with art in the first place. Like the Starry Night has no effect on me, Demoiselle has no effect on me, but seeing that very small painting just very casually sitting there, it moved me, I have to say. And it comes as part of this very lucky feeling to be able to work with some of the most recognizable, works in the world. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be able to do that and to care for them.
Thank you, Abed. Radha, would you like to ask your question and unmute yourself?
Yes, hi. I'm just in my casual mode. I'm just getting finished with teaching my Art 11 at BCC. My question was to Paul and to anyone else. I've been a curator. I worked in the gift shop. I worked in the research library at the Met. I was a curator at Yeshiva University Museum. Then I started teaching college, Touro College, and then BCC. Now, the question I have to ask is how do you juggle, Paul, moving from having your schedule, like if you have a full schedule, three classes, because I'm adjunct, I'm not full-time, and how do you, how many hours are you expected to work at MoMA? Is it part-time? Is it full-time there? And, very, very part-time at BCC? That's the question I want to ask.
Sure. Hi, Rhoda.
Hi. I don't think we ever met each other. Maybe we've seen each other in the halls, just don't know who we are.
No, we haven't, because I'm an adjunct, so I'm only there on Friday afternoons.
So okay. So I'm there in the beginning of the week. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm full-time at MoMA, part-time at BCC. And that kind of flipping of my brain from one kind of way of talking about art to another way of talking about art is, I think, very good for me. And I find it really helpful to kind of remember how to connect in a very different way with art.
Yeah, I have the same thing, because when I teach the object. I teach my own personal experience with it to the students. And when we do go to the museum, I pretend I'm like the aunt or the grandma, and and we go as a family to see some of the works with our masks on. And I give them a guide. But I was just curious about that. So you're full-time at MoMA, and still you have your 1 or 2 classes at BCC. Okay, great. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Just as a quick note, I'm an adjunct professor and I teach conservation students at NYU. And I think when you are in a museum setting, if you do have that kind of job, a lot of museums encourage you to take on kind of scholarly activities outside of the museum. We're lucky at MoMA that they encourage us to go out and seek kind of those kinds of opportunity, be them teaching, be them kind of collaborations with people outside of the museum. So there is a lot of, I don't want to say leeway, but there's a lot of encouragement to take on that kind of scholarly activity, in particular teaching.
Thank you for sharing those responses. I'm realizing that we're coming up towards the end of our time here, and there's so many questions that you have all raised. We've done our best to get to some of them, as many of them as we could. I want to bring one more question in. I'm wondering if it's possible to share, what are some experience? I'm sorry, trying to find exactly the one that I've brought forward here. I wonder if it's possible to share if you have advice for CUNY students sort of to close us out on anything that you wish you knew about the field, anything that they might do that is maybe outside of the school and the traditional way that we approach a job to get themselves into a position. I think there's already been the suggestion to reach out and be prepared to sort of ask questions and get information from people who you're keen to learn more about or whose jobs you're interested in. But I wonder if there's anything else you would share as they kind of tips on this application process and the job search.
Can I think things you do on your own matter a lot. And particularly for those of you who may not live close to the city or for whom an internship isn't practical, like if you're interested in curating, once we're all allowed out of our houses and our apartments and our offices, turning your living room into a gallery, you've got 3 artist friends, like curate a show. Those kinds of things look huge. I can't tell you how much these things, when at the time I was in Estonia, like designing a fake waiting room for my fake institution, thinking like, what am I doing with my life? I'm 35 years old. And it turned out that like, that's what made the difference for me getting the job, not where I went to school or the jobs I had had before.
Absolutely. I was actually going to say the same thing, in terms of like, for example, conservators, a lot of times they're encouraged to have like a lot of experience before going to the graduate schools with manual dexterity as it relates to conservation. But I think there are a lot of avenues to be able to do things that are showcase manual dexterity that are not conservation. Do you like doing nails? Do you like doing hair? Do you like to tattoo? Do you like to, there are a lot of different things to do that are non-traditional as they might relate to an art setting, in particular a museum, an ivory tower like MoMA. But showing passion for those kinds of things speaks a lot to your character and speaks a lot to your dedication and involvement in a particular subject that showcases that you can actually come into a museum or come into a work setting and be able to delve deeply into whatever tasks that may be at hand.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that because earlier I saw people saying that what if I can't afford to do an internship that isn't paid? I couldn't really afford to do internships during college. I was working 2 jobs. So what I did was like, hey, I know how to gather people. I know how to, hold space for people. I skate. I can bring some skaters together and we can have a function. Like those are all things that can be on your resume or just like valuable experiences that you can bring to the table. So I feel like it's always great to just like use what you have and use what you have at home and just do the things you're passionate about, even if it's not in an institution or through an internship. So I really want to stress that.
And one point I would add is, everyone knows the cliche that the world is a small place. Well, the museum world is an even smaller place. So who is really important sometimes, and the connections you can make and the bridges that you build. So very similar to what Paul mentioned earlier about, maybe taking opportunities at smaller institutions or smaller attractions or whatnot, because you'll never know who you might cross paths with again later down the line. It's happened to me several times. So I would say try to meet and connect with as many people as you can and find those connections.
Yeah, I support what Billy just said, because it's just, you know, you look at MoMA, or you look at the Met or the Guggenheim, and you just think that that's the goal. Well, that might be the goal, but you know, the Queens Museum is one of my favorite small gems in this city, and it is just amazing. And that's a great place to start too. You know, and also the Bronx Museum as well. So, I mean, we have so many institutions in the city. So please, you know, just keep looking at all of them, because it's just about it. First of all, you have to get in there and you get a sense of what a museum space is about and what are the things that they do. And that'll help you it'll help you focus more on really what you feel most passionate about and feel strongly and want to really pursue. And then, you know, I always say you can always create your own. Don't go out here looking all the time for thinking that if you go to the large institution that is what you have, that you must do that. It is okay to build something brand new and completely never seen before, because sometimes those ideas are actually the ideas that people want to bring into the museum, and that is your way in. So also be bold for yourself as well.
And I just want to, so I was going to touch really quickly. You know, my first conservation experience was working at the Notarial Archives in New Orleans. I was basically dusting and vacuuming a bunch of notarial archives with leases from, like, you know, the 19th century. It is not art, right? So there are, some people might consider it art, but I find it to be like a very practical, you know, pragmatic type internship. Search government agencies, look for foundations, libraries, archives, people in private practice. A lot of people do curatorial practice privately, or they do conservation practice privately. You know, even like building management, engineering, a lot of firms work with museums. We have HVAC systems, right? We have air conditioning in the museum. We have people who are licensed particularly to work with museums, right? So there are lots of avenues of entering, you know, putting your foot through the door, right, that don't involve being in curatorial in particular. So seek those opportunities out and make those connections, because, you know, like Max said, there are people who know people, and I think Billy said that as well, people who know people, and you'll be able to kind of create those connections for yourself as well.
I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I just want to say a couple quick things to close us out, which is just that this has been such a candid and I think helpful conversation. Thank you all for sharing so openly about your experiences and suggestions for how to sort of navigate. I want to kind of acknowledge that it's been such a trying and unusual year, and you know, today really does mark a you know, milestone that we're at, you know, really having been through a year of this pandemic. And it's, you know, we're in the midst of a really changing employment landscape right now, and there are many challenges and opportunities out there. And thank you all for bringing your wisdom into the space to help us all sort of think through that. I want to also acknowledge that we are going to be offering a workshop for some of the questions we didn't get to about, that's really focused on students who are interested in thinking about writing resumes and cover letters, very specifically about, you know, the same kind of areas of interest in terms of working in museums, working in the arts, working in administration within the arts. That's coming up on March 24th, and we encourage you to register. It's free at 10 a.m. And we'll be following up with resources, that among many others that were mentioned today, in an email to everybody who joined us today. So stay tuned for that. I also want to say that if you have lingering questions that haven't been acknowledged today, or that we didn't get to for not having enough time for this robust conversation, we will welcome you to email either myself directly or my colleague Hannah directly, and we can make sure that the questions that need to, you know, be brought to some of these colleagues around the work that they do can get to them, and we'll get back to you. You know, bear with us in terms of that, but we'll do our best to answer all those questions. Thank you all so much for being here today and sharing with us. Paul, Amara, Abed, Billy, Mac, and Sydney. Thank you to Hannah and our colleagues in AV for making it all run smoothly. And thank you to all the participants for bringing your voice into this conversation, sharing your questions, and you know, we wish you the best as you navigate this process, and we hope that we can continue to, you know, have conversations like this moving forward. It feels like there's a lot to talk about in this space. Thank you all. We will mention also that Hannah will drop a survey into the chat for those of you who have a moment to answer. You know, we like to learn from our programs and figure out how we can make them better for you. And we'd love your responses to your experience today in that survey. And we'll follow up by email with it too if it feels like you need a bit of time to reflect first. Thank you all so much for being here. I wish you all a happy spring evening, and until next time.